gummy bear.
It's the internet. You're busy. Let's do this. I was like sitting there. Ben Hanson's with me, everybody. I was sitting there thinking, like, I didn't tell Ben that there's a long pause with silence, and I'm like, huh? And then then I look over and see the preview. It switched over to program, and I'm just staring at myself. Let's do this for January 20th, 2023. For the next hour or so, let me help you sort through the world of gaming on Game This Mornings Live with me, Jeff Grubb. Today, for better or worse, this is still Giant Bomb. But first, please join me in welcoming today's co-host to Game This Mornings. It is Ben Hanson. Ben, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Yeah, glad to be here. I think I was looking, the last episode I was on was in July, where we were talking about Ubisoft canceling games and The Last of Us Part 1. So I'm looking forward to a completely different conversation for this episode.
Yeah, in this episode, we're talking about Ubisoft canceling games and Last of Us Part 1. We'll get into all of that. But of course, yesterday, two of our coworkers, Jess O'Brien and Jason A. Stryker, were laid off, as well as our sweet little art boy, Justin Vachon. This is something that I haven't experienced in a while. I haven't worked for a corporation like this in a very long time. Last time I experienced it, I was at J.C. Penney, and I got laid off from the sort facility. And so it's like, oh yeah, this kind of came out of nowhere, and I forgot that this is what it's like. If you're trying, I put this on Twitter, Ben, but I see people trying to like reason it out, trying to understand what happened, trying to be like, okay, well, we know that like when we go to the site, it looks like this, and so maybe this happened for this reason. You have to just throw all that away. I promise you, it was so much more random and less thought out than that. It was just. There is no real reasoning behind it. There is no, mind to the madness. It just was numbers on a spreadsheet. It was that cold and cruel, and we are left to deal with the ramifications of that, with what's left over there, and it feels real tough, Ben.
Yeah. I would say I can't imagine. I've been through some layoffs back at Game Informer and whatnot, but this was a tough one. And the rhyme or reason thing. I think a big thing is everyone's just saying, wait a minute, 2 video people for a site that's primarily video content, and that's part of that struggling to understand how is this possible. So I think everyone's worried about Jan, how he's doing with all this in a couple different fronts. How are you? How's the team? And then on a lighter note, that's not that light. I mean, how are you going to handle all this video with one video person?
The reality is we're not going to be able to handle it all, right? I mean, this is why it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's we had these plans for growth, and before we could execute on them, we've been kneecapped. I think the reality is we just won't be able to do as much. Like that's the clear answer there. As far as how everyone's doing on the team, it was a shock. It hurt, and we're looking at each other and be like, we still really like this team, and we still want to keep making stuff together. And so that's it. That's the answer. It just that was the answer before, and it was a much better answer when you had 3 producers. Here's the thing about Jess and Jason. I've worked here, July was one of my first months here. I've been here about 6 months. In that time, I got to watch every time anyone asked anything of Jason or Jess or Justin, that they would just completely deliver every time. When people asked them to make significant changes to the way they approach things, they would do it. And that was always so impressive to me, because I struggle with those kinds of things. I'm very stuck in my ways. I do things a certain way. And so when I see other professionals that I work with, just meeting challenges and overcoming them, I'm like, okay, these are the kind of people you need on a team to make something work. And then to come into work the next day, and they're just not here. It is demoralizing. No doubt. I see the reactions from the community saying, I thought this was what our premium subscriptions were paying for.
Right.
And I did too. And that's why, again, no sense to it. There is 0 sense. And we've, haven't had a lot of opportunities to present our feelings about this yet. We will get those. But really, we don't have a lot of answers right now, other than this is still Giant Bomb. We still have a team that we want to make stuff with, and I'm still excited about that. But boy, it's a lot more tainted today than it was yesterday.
What I see the sentiment out there a lot of, and I'm very familiar with this, of just how do we help
Yeah.
How, I mean, premium subscriptions, or what would you point people to? I mean, other than, follow Jason as Unistrike on Twitch, follow,
Yes.
Voidburger on Twitch, and she has a Patreon as well. But I mean, outside of that, I mean, how can people make sure that Giant Bomb is sustainable from their perspective?
Yeah, let's reiterate though. You definitely, Jess as a Patreon. Follow that if people want to drop it here in the chat. If people want to, I'll retweet it on Twitter again. If Jason comes out and asks for help, we're all going to help him. All right, everybody, just period. In terms of Giant Bomb, the thing is, we had a plan for like, okay, we're going to expand how stuff works with premium, and we're going to improve that. And this is a show that does pretty well. Ben, I do this show like 4 times a week, and it gets a pretty decent audience, and the podcast side of it is growing, and we don't have any ads on it. Like, it's like, well, what the hell's going, like, why are we cutting people when we haven't even explored every avenue to create money, to make money? Now,
right.
These are things that we're getting worked on, and I get to a certain extent why businesses freak out and make these decisions, but it's just, you just want some, you want to see some, again, mind to the madness, and there wasn't any of that. So what can you do to help? Just honestly, don't feel like you got to rush to do anything. It's not on you guys. We're going to figure this out. We give us some time is what I'll say. Give us a little bit of patience. Give us a chance to figure this out. Let us maybe stretch our legs a little bit and try some things that might be a little bit different. When we do find out ways to bring some people into the fold, be as welcoming as possible, because it's usually us trying to figure out what other things can work. And then I don't know, just keep it. The audience is the best audience in gaming. I say it every show, and I continue to mean it. It continues to be true. And so just keep doing that, because it makes it all worth it, really. I love being a part of Giant Bomb. And that's not going to change, and that's always been because of the audience, not because of whoever owns Giant Bomb. I've barely interacted with anyone from that side of things ever. I'm interacting with you all every single day. If you keep showing up, we're going to keep showing up. So that's really all I'm going to ask her now.
Yeah, and it was nice to see, if anybody ever doubted their impact. I mean, the amount of love that exploded yesterday for Jess and Jason. I hope they are able to emotionally receive all that and are able to remember that, just to prove just how much of an impact they had and whatnot.
Yep.
But I mean, hats off to Jason for a hell of a run, almost
10 years.
decade.
Yep.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I mean, going back, I worked with Jason back at Game Informer for 3 years, 2.5 years, something like that. He was the video editor over there, and just what a sweetheart, and also so damn smart. He saved my ass 3,000 times when it came to video tech, because I was hired before him as the video producer, like the first video producer at Game Informer. And I was like, yeah, I can do it. I like editing. Sure, I can build a Game Informer studio. And then it was time to build that Game Informer studio, and I've never leaned on somebody harder than like, Jason, please help me. For the love of God, I need your tech expertise. And he came through in such a big way. And before he left, one of the sweetest gifts he gave me of many was I sat him down. I'm like, I'm just going to record on my phone, and you're going to walk through all the tech in the studio just so I can have your brain downloaded a little bit, because I'm so dependent on you and what you've done for Game Informer. And so, wish him all the best for whatever he wants to do next, but a super talented guy. And Jess, shout out to her. I mean, it is tough to come into a place like Giant Bomb. It's like, hey, I'm a new personality, maybe out of nowhere for a lot of people. And for her to fit in so well, to receive that much feedback, I know is brutal at times, but she was great. She was great, especially on the Bombcast.
Yes.
I remember years ago talking to Mark McDonald over there from 84 Play and whatnot. And I think it was Tim Turry and I, who's now at PlayStation, but we asked him hey, Mark, what's the secret to good podcasting in your mind? And he said, oh, strong opinions. That's all it is. And I feel like Jess came in with some strong opinions that were memorable, whether you loved him or hated him at times. It's like, God bless her for swinging for it and being memorable. And hats off to her for sure.
Yep. I'm going to keep in touch with both of them, but I kind of miss working with them. It was just it was truly delightful, and it was my honor, honestly. So shout out to them. Give them all the love they need. Continue spreading around any links that they share, any help that they ask for. We're going to be there. And if you have job prospects, for sure, hit them up. And meanwhile, over here at Job Bomb, we'll do our best. Let's get into it. But before we do, let's explain what we do here. Most weekdays, Jeff Grubb, will help piece your gaming life back together. That includes breaking news and maybe some of our own original reporting. For all these topics, I'll get the input of a bona fide expert who will make me look smart. If you are watching live on Twitch, welcome. You can always listen to the show later on podcast feeds by searching for Game Mess Mornings or find the RSS on giantbomb.com. You can also catch the show later with chapters and timestamps on YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Okay, we have a lot to get into, so let's start the morning mess with 343 Industries will no longer make Halo games, but will oversee outside development, according to certain reports. This comes from Darren Bonthus at GameSpot. A new report has claimed that longtime Halo developer 343 Industries is being taken off of active development of the franchise, and that new games in the series will be created by third-party studios. According to Halo leaker Bathrobe Spartan, which is a hell of a name, who has a solid track record leaking Halo inside information, and this has been translated by Metro, Microsoft's mass layoffs have hit 343 Industries hard and will see up to a third of its workforce laid off. Veteran developer Joseph Staten is also reportedly exiting the studio, as we talked about yesterday on the show. 343 Industries will then take on a parental role for Halo going forward, overseeing new games and content while working on maintaining the game's engine. This isn't entirely new territory for 343 Industries, as it has relied on outside help to develop Halo Infinite's multiplayer content for a long time now. And I think that's mostly been true for Infinite as well, Ben, where that has primarily been made by a certain affinity and a handful of other teams.
Right.
But Bathrobe Spartan claims that the planned story-based DLC has been scrapped due to it being considered not cost-effective under 343's stewardship. A follow-up to Halo Infinite is also expected to enter pre-production along spin-off titles, with these games reportedly being franchised out to other studios and being developed on more modest budgets. While Halo Infinite has had a strong launch, recent months have seen 343 Industries criticized for delayed content rollouts, tedious multiplayer progression, and numerous bugs. This has always felt like the nuclear option for what is happening with Halo over at Microsoft, right, Ben? And now they've pressed the button, and here we are.
It's so sad. I mean, at some point, I want somebody to write a 1,000-page book just about the ups and downs, lots of downs of 343, where it's like there's so much talent in that studio, and I feel like every project they've had has just been brutal, and especially, interacting with the Halo fan base, which is super, super passionate, and so that is just a maelstrom. But I mean, it's interesting to zoom out a little bit as well and just see it as like, if this is true, which, by the way, do you believe this is true? You think this is going to be happening?
I think that there's definitely something along these lines happening over there.
Yeah.
These details might not be exactly right, but I've heard for a long time that like they were looking to clean house over there. I know even Bathrobe Spartan has said like Bonnie Ross quit. I've still heard that she was mostly asked to leave. And again, that's I pretty much verified that, but like, look for this whenever like there's conflicting stuff, look for the space where both things can be true is kind of what I always say. And I think that's where another thing with Bonnie Ross there, but it just feels like they've been looking for a way to make 343 work and always keeping in the other hand, we need to just blow this whole thing up and move on. So I think that at least part of this seems true.
Yeah. But then zooming out, it's that idea of, boy, Microsoft is really learning over the last 15 years at this point. Like, building up a new studio is really, really hard. It is a miracle that PlayStation has other studios running relatively well despite all their challenges. But I mean, it has me worried about the initiative. It's just this recurring theme of just Microsoft in particular just getting beaten down when it comes to the challenges of building up a new team. And it also makes me think of, I remember when they first founded 343, and I was back at Game Informer, and Brian Vore and I went out and visited the studio. And the original idea, and I think people have talked about this plenty, but the original idea with 343 was it was going to be this type of operation where they would kind of manage Halo. I'm trying to remember what the Age of Empires team, is it Worlds Apart? There's kind of the Age of Empires managers within Microsoft.
Yes,
it feels like they might be going for this model. But the original idea was to have 343 be that type of thing. And then I believe it was going to be Gearbox was going to be developing Halo 4. And then they're like, you know what? Maybe we actually want to pull that internally and build up our own team. And it's just been so many years now of them just getting beaten down for that decision. Some solid games have come out of it. But man, it's been rough.
Yeah, I mean, you said it. Building up a team is hard. Building games has proven demonstrably very difficult. And it feels like every time with 343 Industries, they just found a way for any progress they made to not carry over to the next game, and that just made it always feel so volatile over there.
Yeah,
that's going to be true for any studio where they you try to put together a new studio today and you say, go make a big AAA game. I promise you that first game is not going to be a Game of the Year contender, an 85 plus on Metacritic. They almost always have to learn so much stuff that first time around that it is like, even if you have a lot of experience, it's going to end up like the Callisto Protocol. That's just kind of how it's going to go. You need to get to that second game and carry forward all of that institutional knowledge. And it just seems like that part of the prospect of building a team that could carry forward institutional knowledge without having to deal with a massive amount of tech debt or being able to handle that tech debt was just never something 343 could figure out. That's not to say like, oh, they're incompetent. Obviously, there is some incompetency, and it seems like it was at the top for sure. But it is to say it is a challenge no matter who you are.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people I'm sure that have been there the entire time with like Frank O'Connor, I believe he's still there and whatnot, pretty high up. But you think of just the creative director role and how much that's shuffled. I mean, they started out with Ryan Payton coming off Metal Gear Solid 4, and he was the original creative director for Halo 4, and then it switched to Josh Holmes, then it switched to Tim Longo, and then Joseph Staten. Who was the Halo Infinite creative director? Was it just Staten? Or before that,
Halo Infinite. No, there was someone else before Staten, but I mean, I don't remember who it was. But it was like, he came in and took over that role basically.
Right. But just having that shuffling leadership role is just, it feels a little bit like flailing with one of the biggest properties in the world, and especially this is just rough to think of the comparison of, Cyberpunk Edgerunners boosting Cyberpunk in such a big way, Last of Us TV show presumably boosting Last of Us in a big way, and then the Halo TV show comes out. Divisive at best, and then again, what happens to the game?
Like 343's main core competency was always supposed to be overseeing the Halo brand to making sure that everything involved with it was of high quality, and it's like they couldn't even get the TV show right as far as many fans were concerned.
Yeah, and I mean, Halo Infinite, the whole idea, right? It was supposed to be a living game with constantly updated story content and stuff like that. So to scrap that, to make Halo Infinite very much Halo Finite, and just be like, that kind of cliffhanger of story, like. Is that where they're going to leave things? Is that going to be the end of at least this? Well, I guess the successor they'll pick up from that point, but it is mind-boggling. I mean, do you think they're going to shift away to Unreal or some other engine and get away from their, Slipstream? Is that the name of their custom engine?
Slipstream is the name of the engine, and they, I mean, the story says that like 343's job will be maintaining the Slipstream engine.
Right.
I think that... I think everything's on the table. I believe that Certain Affinity is making their Halo Battle Royale, which I think is codenamed Tatanka. I think they are making that in Unreal, and who's to say if that takes off, if that becomes like the next big thing with Halo, that could sort of just naturally replace it over time, replace what was Halo before that, and then all of a sudden all the Halo games are being made in Unreal. And then you don't have to deal with having a team around that needs to maintain an engine that was never really idealized for making this stuff in the first place. We always had a lot of tech debt and always caused a lot of problems. I think that this is just it's such a tough spot because you're right that we are coming off a game that was at launch pretty good, and everything that went wrong was involved in the sort of follow up to that and giving enough content on the multiplayer side of things and making the single player game feel like it was completed because it didn't feel quite complete at launch. And it's okay. Well, you can get there, and then everything involved with that just went sideways or went wrong or went bad, and now they have to find some way to find a team that's going to be capable. And the story also says modest budgets. So it's like, I mean, I think they recognize there's not like a lot of teams out there that can make a Halo the size of Halo or like a quad A Halo game. So you're going to have to use modest budgets because those are the only teams that are really out there, unless you want to try to cobble something together from like 5 different studios. And then that's just inviting another headache because that's going to be so difficult to manage.
If there's any upside, and it's tough to find an upside with especially all the layoffs here and whatnot, but it's like, it might be interesting to see if a modest budget means a little more experimental, something like, ODST. If you have a bunch of new teams given Halo and they get to make something a little bit stranger and smaller, I'm on board for that. I don't think, was it Spartan Assault? What was the name of that, like, twin stick version? Like, I hope it's not stuff like that, but I worry it might be something that small. Yeah.
I mean, obviously they need a core Halo single player experience going forward. I think they probably at least understand that much, and then they could try a bunch of other stuff in addition to that. It's going to be it looks like Halo's going to continue to be in this very rough shape going forward. The shape that it's been in for a long time now. Doesn't look like anything's changing there.
Do you think, genuinely, has Phil Spencer ever kicked a wall just thinking about Halo? Like, if you're Phil Spencer, would you just in the shower every morning just scream and punch the wall a little bit? Just be like, oh, for so long it's been so close and we just can't make it the hit that it deserves to be. What's your reaction?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, someone in chat, Luder Jennings says, I hope so. And I think I kind of hope so too. And I don't know if he has. I hope he's like that frustrated by it. And
yeah, you'd have to be.
Something about it seems like maybe he's not that frustrated by it. Maybe it's like one of the problems. I don't know. It's tough to say. I'm not going to pretend to understand the inner workings of Phil Spencer's mind or his relationship to the other leadership people at Microsoft. But something just seems off in the state of Denmark over there. It just seems like I don't know. The leadership doesn't seem like it has that sense of urgency about something as important as Halo. And so maybe he hasn't kicked a wall. And if he hasn't, I think that's a failure of sorts over there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they feel the urgency, but when you're trying to wrangle, probably 1,000 people and get them all in line, I think it's just natural chaos that has got to be infuriating.
Yeah.
And I think back to what was it, 2017 or 2018, when they had an official cheeky message about please, battle royales, the only BR in Halo ever is going to be the battle rifle. Oh no, why did you say it? And now it's looking back on it, it's like, God, what state would they be in if they just would have, pulled a Fortnite and gone okay, we're going all in a battle royale. Let's just try it.
Yeah, and it's like that map, and not that I know it can necessarily support with a slipstream engine having 50 to 100 players on that map all at once. But if it could, that map was tailor-made already to be a battle royale map. You just put a bunch of people in that open world Halo Infinite map, right, and you're good to go. It's that simple. But you already have the vehicles and everything there. So it's you should have just done that. But I mean, not necessarily that it's that would have been the silver bullet, but it definitely would have been better than just having the very limited modes and options that they did launch with.
Which are still fun to play. There's so much about Halo Infinite that's super fun to play. And
yes,
actually this has reminded me I got to go check out Forge. I'm curious to see what's going on in there. Also, just to save us corrections in the future, Slip Space engine.
Slip Space. Thank you. Yeah. It's so easy to just go slipstream. Yeah, Slip Space. That's right.
Slipped right out.
Thank you. All right. I could keep talking about this forever, but let's move on. Nintendo Switch production is reportedly set to increase later this year. This comes from Bharat Ozkan at DualShockers. Nintendo is reportedly intending to increase the production of the Nintendo Switch in the next fiscal year, which is due to begin in April 2023, according to a report from Bloomberg. Sources told that media outlet that Nintendo is now targeting over 19 million units shipped until the end of the next fiscal year to meet consumer demand for the best-selling hardware, debunking analysts' forecast about its manufacturing strategy. The report claims that Nintendo has already informed suppliers and business partners that it is planning to manufacture more units in the current fiscal year to meet consumer demand for the now aging console. Nintendo believes it could sell more units than last year, now that the component shortage is no longer an issue for the increase in production. Although the company has not provided a specific target to business partners, Nintendo is said to be targeting over 19 million units. Ben, and it would be really wild for the Switch at this point in its life, based on historical trends, to sell more this year than last year, even keeping in mind component shortages. It just seems like we are at the natural tail off. And if Nintendo doesn't believe that, what does that mean for Nintendo's hardware future?
Right. I mean, if this year, though, has Tears of the Kingdom, and I know these are cursed words around these parts, but some sort of Metroid Prime something, if it's 4 or the remaster, it's not impossible. I think the sales will do well. I mean, it feels like the Nintendo Switch at this point has become the Mario Kart 8 of just it's just going to keep selling forever. Yep. People will want it. Don't worry about how old it is. It's still a good product. And that wider base has not quite met up with how many they could sell,
Yeah. I mean, it's this is not completely unprecedented. Obviously, the Game Boy just was going and was having a natural tail off. And then Pokemon came along. It just seems like that's not necessarily what could happen here. You already had Pokemon. You had a 10 million selling Pokemon game last year, and you think you're going to sell even more Switches this year. Zelda's huge. Zelda's definitely huge, but it's not as big as having a big new mainline new generation Pokemon. But I mean, we'll see if it was just component shortages really, and they weren't able to make enough, and that was really what's holding them back. then obviously they can sell more this year. But it just feels like a lot of people are, not a lot, maybe wrong. A significant portion of the audience is beginning to move on from the Switch. They want something new. And when they think about what games they're going to play, even if it is looking down the barrel of a Switch exclusive, they might not be as excited about that as they once were. And that then, all right, then we need a follow-up to the Switch. And is that in the cards? I mean, do you think they announce a new Switch this year?
No. Why would you? You still got plenty of software in the pipeline. I think they're doing okay. I think next year they'll start to ramp it up. And who knows? It's...
really, it's all just guessing. Yes, of course. We have no idea. But
if you're guessing, Grubb, what chance do the rest of us have? Good Lord.
I mean, listen, I've never been able to I've never heard one thing about this new Switch that everyone was talking about all those years. And so I was always just guessing. And it feels like, well, what they have to do something. And then you have to stop right there. Anytime you say Nintendo has to, you got to stop, because Nintendo doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to do, they can get away with anything because they're Nintendo. And what did we say yesterday? Like, the companies don't operate on what they have to do. They do what they can get away with. They can get away with charging $70, so they do it. They can get away with selling the Switch at the same price that it launched at, and technically higher because of the Switch OLED, because they can get away with it. So they are going to do it. And it's like, well, if they could get away with continuing to sell this same system for yet another year at that same price and taking all the profit from having a very cheap hardware to manufacture and still selling at that price and then selling a ton of games with it, it seems like they might actually take that opportunity. And I always thought, okay, there is the other side of things where, okay, so they're not feeling a ton of pressure from the market to upgrade. I think that's beginning to shift, but they are experiencing a little bit more piracy with every single game, and maybe they wouldn't want to move on from that. But maybe that's not making enough of a difference, because you do look at the game sales, and the games are still selling. 6 of the top 20 games, doubled the next closest publisher on the MPD for last year, were all Nintendo games. So it's
and that's what, not counting digital? Is that what it was?
And that's not counting digital, where almost every other game on the chart does include digital, right?
Yeah.
And it's so they are just, their games are selling. They are really selling, and it's maybe they don't want to up in that apple cart, because it's all working right now, and that also gives them more time to prepare for the next generation and figure out how they want to do this transition, which I've always believed is going to be a pretty difficult one for them, because they've never had one where they try to carry over as much as I think they're going to try to carry over this time. They're going to have Nintendo Switch Online that's going to work on the Switch, and whatever the follow-up is going to be. And they probably are going to try to have backward compatibility, full backward compatibility, and not just based on having a Game Boy cartridge slot on the Game Boy Advance that, it takes both things. It's going to be like a little bit different than that. So it's like they're really trying to, I think, pull something off that they haven't really done before. And so they want extra time to figure that out. Still, though, it feels like we're going to get to early 2024 and not have heard about this. That would be wild to me still. I think maybe there's still a chance at the end of this year they say something about the next Switch, and then maybe it takes a year to launch or something like that. But I don't know if they have an appetite for that long of a marketing campaign either. It's so hard to pin this stuff down, Ben. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, especially, I mean, if they make a Tears of the Kingdom version of the Switch, I bet they can double up on a lot of people, and they would buy that in addition to their base Switch. So that's easy sales. But I just trying to think of where this year is going. I do think it's going to be a big talker when Tears of the Kingdom comes out. I think, remember with the Xenoblade Chronicles 3, it feels like the piracy angle. People were really talking about it like it's kind of a great way to play that game, and it's out there almost immediately. I think Tears of the Kingdom, it's going to be that Xenoblade conversation times 20 of everybody being like, that Switch version chugs. No doubt it's going to chug. How do we not eat the forbidden fruit? I don't know.
Yep. I mean, no, I think that's a good way of putting it, because I mean, I was having conversations like, I'm not sure about Fire Emblem Engage, like multiple days before it comes out, and I had several people reach out like, no, I'm already playing it. I got I downloaded it, and I'm playing the pirated copy. And maybe you're right to be worried. Okay, cool. Yeah. So that's where we're at now. Like, that had not happened before. Like, obviously a lot of the games had leaked, but people weren't just like brazenly like reaching out like, I'm playing it, and like just like everyone else, because that's how we all play. I'm like, oh, okay,
interesting.
Yeah. So I think it is still spreading, and Nintendo definitely is aware of that. They might not be aware of all our complaints and stuff. They probably mostly are, but they might not be. They are definitely aware of piracy. That's something that they have teams there take very seriously.
Yeah.
All right. all 11 Ubisoft games to be released in the upcoming year. That's the next headline from Tom Henderson at Insider Gaming. Sources have provided Insider Gaming with a list of all 11 Ubisoft games that are expected to be released. Most of them we've known about. Some of these I'm like, are these all really coming out? But let's just read them. The Division Heartland, which is that free-to-play survival action multiplayer shooter, one that they actually canceled for a little bit and then uncanceled, pulled off the shelf after canceling a different Tom Clancy game. Avatar Frontiers of Pandora, X-Defiant, which is basically a Tom Clancy Call of Duty clone, Assassin's Creed Mirage, that smaller scale Assassin's Creed that's going to be more like older Assassin's Creed, Skull and Bones, Project Orlin, which is apparently, this is one of the new ones on here, apparently a new game in the Crew series. It started as DLC for the Crew 2. It's now a standalone project. It takes place on a Hawaiian island. It could get a different name, something like Motorfest, apparently. Sounds like it's trying to be
Motorfest?
Because it sounds like it's trying to be a Forza Horizon sort of competitor. Because what the whole thing about the Crew was like you drive across the United States, right? Both in Crew and the Crew 2 did that.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, this one's just Hawaii. All right, that does sound more like a Forza Motorsport. So let's go to our Motor Festival. Assassin's Creed Nexus for the Oculus Quest 2. The Division Resurgence, a mobile version of the Division, Rainbow Six Mobile version of Siege, and Assassin's Creed Jade, a mobile version of Assassin's Creed. Yeah, I think that those last three, I don't know, that Assassin's Creed Jade game looks surprisingly good. No idea how it plays, but it looks like an Assassin's Creed game. But I don't know, how do you feel about this list overall?
Not great, Bob. Not great.
Yeah.
First question is Valiant Hearts, the sequel. Is the idea that that's coming out so soon that this isn't encapsulated in this thing, or
I think what it is that this might be the fiscal year. So fiscal year 2024 from April 2023 to March 2024, and Valiant Hearts is coming out before March, right?
Okay, I think they just said early 2023, so I guess that's what it is.
Yeah.
Also, I'm just still trying to wrap my head around what was canceled exactly, because they had 3 or 4 games canceled.
Yeah, and I think most of those things were unannounced, but it seemed like I'm trying to pull from memory. I think one of them was a Sam Fisher Splinter Cell VR game. Things along those lines. So
okay,
yeah,
I think that was actually just because I'm a dork and I went back and looked at my notes for the last episode. I think that was canceled back in July of last year. So these cancellations I think are different.
So different than that. Wow. Yes, that's it. Because there were 7 canceled since July, and that's right. That must have been mentioned. And then I don't think we actually know what the 3 games that were canceled are.
I'm hoping it's not that sequel to Immortals: Phoenix Rising, which you teased at some point on this show of that it's going to be set in like Polynesia.
Yep.
So like 2 island-themed games from Ubisoft is going to be interesting. Hey, maybe they can double up on some research there. The Prince of Persia remake. Not here.
Not that one always seemed like they are rebooting it hard.
Yeah.
And yeah, it seems like it's not going to actually make it out this year. So how you doing, kiddo?
Yeesh.
Yeah, that's rough though. It's like, okay, so I get the feeling that maybe that game never comes out, and maybe that's one of the ones that was canceled. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah. No Star Wars. But that's probably coming after Avatar then? Is that what that's implying? Grubb is muted, but he's being a good dad.
You're dealing with the little kid here. She gets home from school and she wants to say hi. Hello, Addie.
That's very sweet.
Yes. Star Wars is probably much too early. We saw the developer Massive be like, it's going to be a big year for Star Wars and Massive, and people were like, oh, well, that means it's coming out this year. I'm like, guys, no, he's just trying to hire people. Like, he's just trying to get people excited about his game to come work on it. And he later confirmed, like, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cause all this ruckus, but we're just trying to get people to come work on the game. See, that was never going to come out this year. But yeah, I mean, Avatar is like their big license game. Yeah. And that seems like maybe it has the possibility of being surprisingly good. But
I'm excited about it.
Yeah,
I'm the level of dork. I'm joining Jan. I want to go to Pandora. Like, especially if it comes out like December and kind of fills that gap between the 2 movies. Like, I'm on board for that.
Take the wheel, Jimmy Cameron. You send me and Yves Gamal apparently, and take me to Avatar. Yeah, sure.
How much money would you bet? Would you bet your house that X-Defiant will be a flop? Is there anybody in the universe who's optimistic about this thing?
I wouldn't bet my house because it's
coward.
Mostly because I'm a coward, definitely.
Okay.
But also, I think you can never predict like what the weird audience that never watches this show that just still is like suddenly just picks up a game because what the hell. But it's probably, I mean, I think it's going to end up just like all the other Ubisoft Tom Clancy multiplayer spinoffs of late. I think it has a better chance of succeeding than something like Rainbow Six Extraction. That one always felt like, oh boy, that just feels like it can't stand up to other multiplayer options right now. X-Divine at least is like, well, I mean, it's trying to be Call of Duty, and it'll probably end up like Medal of Honor and any other game that was trying to be like Call of Duty since Call of Duty, but I don't know.
At least it's free to play. But yeah, it's still mind-boggling to think that that studio went from South Park, The Fractured But Whole, and then their next game is X-Defiant. That is a transition, man.
Yes, it
and like
is.
Same director and everything. It's mind-boggling.
Yep. But it shows like that's Ubisoft putting their chips down where they think doubling down like, oh, we need more Tom Clancy games. That's what our future is. And it's like, okay, they are chasing trends and kind of getting a little afraid of trying different things, because you would want that South Park team, even if they're not working on South Park, to kind of do something in that style, but in a different direction. No, go make a Call of Duty.
Well, it seems like they hired a lot of writing talent and directors from Telltale. I remember after the South Park game, and I was excited because I'm like, ooh, them making like a new RPG, like an original RPG with that talent sounds great. And then they all left, and then it seems like this pivot happens. So
yeah, I think that tells the whole story right there of how things are going over at Ubisoft. All right, let's keep the show going. GDC survey, 53% of devs support unionization efforts. This comes from Jeffrey Rousseau over at gi.biz. The Game Developers Conference published its annual State of the Industry survey today, showing continued support by respondents regarding unionization efforts. Of the more than 2,300 developers who answered the survey, 53% responded that the video game industry should unionize. Meanwhile, 24% said maybe, 13% objected, and the remaining 10% didn't know if the business sector should form unions. In the last year's survey, 55% of respondents thought the industry should unionize. Despite the overall positive outlook on unions, the report reveals that developers are not speaking about it among their coworkers. When asked if they discussed unionization at their company, 60% said no talks had taken place. However, 22% said they had union conversations, while 19% said they didn't know if talks had happened at their studio. Among other questions surveyed, developers were asked about harassment in the games industry. 91% of surveyors said that the toxicity directed at studios and player harassment is a problem. However, 4% said it wasn't an issue. 5% were unsure. I feel like that 4% is like a margin of error issue alone. Ben, so we could talk about both these aspects, and there's more to this survey as well. I want to start here actually with this harassment one, because yesterday I brought up when Jam was on, we talked about all the problems with Microsoft, and one of the things we mentioned is Phil Spencer at accepting an award and saying that it is brave of developers to release games in a culture of I think he said culture of criticism and cancellation. And it was very easy to take that to mean in the way that basically everyone means it when they say culture of cancellation or even culture of criticism. I do think that there's a chance that he is referring to this specifically, that you put your game out and you might face toxicity from the community. And 91% of developers are worried about this. This is something they probably talk about among themselves. And I want to give a slight benefit of the doubt to Phil Spencer that maybe this is what he was talking about.
I'd imagine.
Yes.
Because, I mean, the little glimpse that I occasionally get into this world is just, other than developers talking about, hey, this is brutal, and Bungie really trying to push back a little bit towards a toxic fan base when they are out of line. But the little glimpse that I have is just every time, and especially, I feel like I'm mentioning Game Informer a lot, but I guess that's what we do here at MinnMax.
Gotta do it.
Yeah, but especially at Game Informer, where you would go on all these cover story trips, like being the video producer, I would go from studio to studio to studio. And anytime you're swept up in mentions on Twitter with a studio or developer tweets at your name, and you just get like this little peek through the keyhole of what they deal with every day on Twitter, unbearable. Just if you could just see Ed Boon's mentions at any point, you would jump off a building. And like you get a glimpse of it as well every time like a popular woman on Twitter as well will mention, you get roped up and just like, oh, how much harassment are these people undergoing every single day that as white guys we just do not see? Yeah, but developers, woof. I mean, there's no way I'd be on Twitter if I was a developer. Yeah, especially for some big property, it'd be impossible.
You do the Dan Reichert method, which he's like, he only sees tweets from people he follows, and it's like, that's right. That's the right way to do it. You just never ever see replies from anyone else, and that's probably the smart way of handling it. Listen, if this is probably what Phil Spencer meant. If he meant it, though, he should have said a culture of toxicity and harassment and not a culture of criticism and cancellation. But I still think this is what he probably meant.
Right, yeah.
As far as unionization, I think that we've definitely seen it, the interest in it grow. We've seen movement in that space. There was the big QA department under ZeniMax that voted to unionize under Microsoft, and they were voluntarily recognized. So that continues to grow. I still think it's mostly been on the QA side, and that 55% number where it's hovering around like just over half believes that this should happen. Eventually, that's got to be like, okay, well, that's the kenneling waiting for the spark that is happening in QA to catch the rest of the developers up in this unionization effort, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. It just seems like, first of all, I love having this data. Hats off to GDC for getting the survey data. But that idea of, it seems like everyone's just saying, yeah, maybe it's a good idea, and then leaving it at that, and they're kind of missing that next step, or just taking the research deep dive into like, what would this actually mean? How do we get this ball rolling? The other part of this survey that I thought was interesting and surprised me is that 62% of people said they work 40 hours a week or less. I am shocked by that number. I thought that would be way lower for the percentage.
I think that that number that's like an increased number compared to previous years, I believe. And I think it's probably a response to the job shortage or the labor shortage. So it's like you can try to force people to work more, but if you're not a good place to work, they can go anywhere. And if they can go anywhere and probably get paid more, and they can also do it remote and work from home. They have so many options that if you are not providing an environment that is amenable and easygoing and respects work-life balance, you are going to stand out, and you are going to be an unattractive place for many of these employees. And it's like, oh man, that's kind of the way it needs to be to get a fair treatment for many employees. These companies have to feel like, oh, we have to be attractive to work at. And it seems like, okay, that seems like it's a success to me. 62%, 40 hours or less. 29% reported that their work week hovered around 36 to 40 hours. It's like, yeah, okay, perfect.
I would love to see, the history of this data, if they're doing polls over the last even 10 years and seeing how that has shifted. And, I understand there's a lot of people are like, oh, quit talking about crunch on podcasts. We get it, blah, blah, blah. But it's like, okay, talking about it more has improved the lives of all these developers. Like, hey, game on. That's wonderful.
It's a long process from EA spouses to this point, but it's like, it is something that, I know people hate the iterative nature of this stuff. If like you talk about it, see slight changes maybe. It's like, can't we just change it? It's bad, just change it all in once. It's like, well, no, that's not the way these cultures usually shift. They shift slowly over time, and here we are. Now, people are pointing out in chat, and of course, this goes without saying, lots of layoffs in the tech sector now, likely going to reverse some of these improvements. That's just, of course, you're absolutely right. This is not a lot of these gains probably will be lost, and it's just, man, this is why you need ingrained protections and unions and good, strong labor laws and everything else. Also, the survey said developers really hate NFTs. 61% expressed opposition, and 25% of developers said they were uncertain or had no opinion. Only 14% said they were in favor of using blockchain technology. So shout out to that 14%. The Last of Us co-creator says lack of credit for HBO show in argument for unionization. And that's his quote. This comes from Ollie Welsh at Polygon. Bruce Straley, co-director and co-creator of The Last of Us, the original 2013 PlayStation 3 game, is not mentioned in the credits for the new HBO TV adaptation, which aired its first episode this week. His co-director, Neil Druckmann, however, who is actively involved in the show as its executive producer and co-creator with TV showrunner Craig Mazin, also gets a mention as the writer of the original. And it's here's the quote like that you'll see in the show. Based on the PlayStation Studios video game created by Naughty Dog and written by Neil Druckmann, the on-screen credit reads. Straley, it seems, isn't too happy about this outcome, although his primary responsibility on the game was gameplay, while Druckmann was the script and story writer. The pair have repeatedly said that they created the world and the storyline of The Last of Us together. But when asked about his lack of credit by the Los Angeles Times, Straley chose his words and his targets carefully. And here's the quote. It's an argument for unionization, that someone who was part of the co-creation of that world and those characters isn't getting a credit or a nickel for the work they put into it. Straley said, maybe we need unions in the video game industry to be able to protect creators. And this is, this is a story as old as time. As happens with comic book creators and artists all the time, with these movies making billions of dollars. And it's like the artist that was primarily responsible for bringing this creation into the world isn't even mentioned, let alone getting money. And now here it is happening with video games. And of course it is. This is how the system works, right?
Yeah, it's brutal. I mean, so, to drop the Game Informer name once more, like back in, was it 2011, maybe early 2012. But we did the cover story for The Last of Us, and so we went out to visit Naughty Dog, and then also for Uncharted 4. So I spent several days all together at Naughty Dog with Neil and Bruce, and it very much felt like a 50-50 effort, going into this. And yes, Neil was primarily worried about specifically the smaller scale writing, second to second writing, I guess is a better way to put it, but overall story and everything with gameplay. I mean, Bruce is a huge part of this equation. And I get it. It's tough. Because it's like, well, you're not crediting him. You're also not crediting the hundreds of other people who busted their ass to make The Last of Us. And they have said, hey, Naughty Dog made this game. That's at least something. So it's always just, how should they have handled this? Bruce, was a huge part of that. It would have been nice for him to be credited in the show in some way, more so with like the multiple official Last of Us podcasts, like the HBO one, and then there's still the Christian Spicer hosted PlayStation one. Like I listened to both those episodes talking about the show, and like they didn't mention Bruce when talking about the history of the game. So it's just, I think in those types of situations, it'd be nice if somebody like a Neil said like, oh, I co-created it or co-led it with Bruce Straley back in the day. All this being said, I did go back and check for The Last of Us Part 1. The credits for that, they have special thanks, and then after that, they really went above and beyond for thanking Bruce, where they said, Naughty Dog would like to express our deep gratitude to Bruce Straley for his instrumental role in the development of The Last of Us and to all of his contributions to the kennel during his many years with us.
This is the remake.
That's the remake,
okay.
Which I thought was a really classy, nice move.
Yes.
And so, what is the right level to credit somebody like Bruce Straley in the show? Do you think it's just a lock that they should put his name in the credits and give him money?
I don't think it's necessarily a lock. I think that he's right, though, that there should be union rules to determine this stuff. Because, I mean, that's how it works in film. Like, you can be a script doctor and you might not get the credit on the film, which means you don't get residuals and things like that. But if you rewrite 50% of the script, you do get it. It's like, okay, that's
sure.
I'm not responsible for any of that kind of work, so I would expect the people who are involved, the people at these unions or these imaginary unions in this case, to come up with those rules of what they think it would be crucial to say. Okay, they say they created this game together. Bruce Straley was in every meeting, every conversation about what these characters should be like, should look like, should sound like, should play like. At a certain point, I'm like, oh, that sounds like enough to be like, you are the co-creator of this universe and should be credited as such in perpetuity from now on for the history of the world. Like that seems right. Again, not necessarily a lot, because I would have imagine they can decide this themselves as creators, but it does seem like it should be that way to me, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, it's interesting saying, where his quote. By the way, hats off to the LA Times.
Yes,
for doing this in depth of an article and not just being like, video game curse is broken.
Yep.
But they actually went and interviewed Bruce, which is awesome. But him said like, maybe it's an argument to unionize. It's like, he has a new studio with Wildflower Interactive. Like, if he feels that way, put your money where your mouth is and try it. If you're feeling that confident in it.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, it is telling the fact that he hasn't tweeted about the show. I mean, if you really want to go down the Twitter drama rabbit hole, somebody on the MinnMax show a while ago wrote in and noted that, like, it's weird that Neil and Bruce don't follow each other on Twitter. It's like, that is weird. We have no idea how complicated that relationship is professionally and personally, but it is like, that's something. So that idea of added tension between Bruce Straley and Naughty Dog, that's some slight ammo in that camp. And, Uncharted 4 burned a lot of people,
Yes, it did.
When he was the game director for that. I mean, in Jason Schreier's book, Blood, Sweat, and Pixels, there's a great chapter just about the brutal development of Uncharted 4 and how Bruce actually got a second apartment right next to the studio just because he was spending so much time there. And I think Uncharted 4 is fascinating in a lot of ways, but also the idea that Uncharted 4 is kind of about, a metaphor for game development of, Nathan Drake being pulled back into the adventure one more time. He's got to hurt his family, but he's got to do it because he's got that thrill for adventure. And it's like, okay, it was an easy metaphor to be like, okay, they think this is about game development, everybody, and how much it hurts your family to just pour yourself into this. So it's a fascinating story. And yeah, it'd be nice if Bruce got more shout outs out there as people are talking about the show. But I think part of it too is, The Last of Us Part 2 was such a big talker, and Neil became such a lightning rod for good and bad. And there's a lot of bad on the internet that I think so many people are like, Last of Us? That's Neil Druckmann. Because of so many stories about Last of Us Part 2 that they kind of forget the origins of this whole thing.
Yep, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, of course, it's strained. I mean, the LA Times story says the relationship is strained. It was strained between Naughty Dog and Israeli. That happens all the time. I invite everyone to think about the people you work with and the bosses that you have. And if you had to like turn up, I mean, maybe a lot of you do work in environments where it's like, I am working 60-hour work weeks and we were trying to get something done and finished over the course of 3 years. And those feelings that like get amplified during something like that in that sort of high pressure situation, of course, it leads to strained relationships over time. That's just humanity. That's how we all work.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting in that LA Times article that that Bruce specifically said, like, I brought Neil to No Country for Old Men to show him that movie, and that was such a big inspiration for The Last of Us and kind of the tone of The Last of Us. But he's kind of like, I introduced him to the Coen brothers, actually. Which I don't know if we asked him about it or anybody ever has, but I'd imagine Joel in the game is named after Joel Coen.
Someone should ask him that. We should look into that. I bet that's true. At least they're like a sort of honoring the source there. That's pretty cool.
I would think.
That's fantastic. All right, let's keep it going here. EA Sports PGA Tour releases this March. This comes from Bharat Ozkan at DualShockers. EA Sports has announced that it will release its first golf game in more than a decade. Really, has it been that long? Titled EA Sports PGA Tour, which will be available for PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X and S, and PC through Steam on March 24th. The announcement came with an in-depth trailer giving golf enthusiasts their first detailed look at shot types and a variety of gameplay. Blah, blah, blah. This was something that when EA shared that little calendar of, here's our calendar for the rest of the year. There's an unannounced like big partner game, and like, well, that's Star Wars. And then we have another sports game. And people are like, oh, maybe it's the baseball game. It was always the golf game. Here it is coming right before the end of the fiscal year. I really like that the 2K golf game recently, Ben. I'm wondering if this EA Sports PGA Tour game, a game made by I believe by Tiburon, the Madden team.
Oh, really?
Yes, I believe it is. And so it's like, man, that team's already kind of split up working on the NCAA football game. They have a lot going on their plate. I mean, I believe they even had to like delay the NCAA game because there's so much going on. I'm very curious to see what the end state of this game is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So are we going to go back to the kind of the rivalries, or we'll have the 2K golf and EA golf, and we'll see who comes out on top? That's fine.
I mean, they're like splitting up IP and trademark rights, and I think the other game, the 2K game has the PGA Tour, or no, this is the PGA Tour, but the 2K game has like certain Masters and big championships, and this game won't, and this game will have certain players, and the other game won't, so it's going to be one of those situations. I'll be curious to see how the rivalry actually ends up playing out.
That's right. And then somebody else can pick up the rights and do that Saudi golf tour.
Yes,
that's
be a gold mine. Get Liv going, yes.
Oh, boy.
I don't know, is actually pronounced Liv? I have no idea, but yes.
No idea.
Yeah, someone could do that, and that'll be a real hot mess. Sony Spotlight, the PlayStation VR 2 launch window lineup. There's a whole bunch of games here. I'm gonna read some of these highlights. Let's see, Cities VR, we knew that. Creed, Rise to Glory, the Dark Picture Switchback. Let's see, Fantavision 22X. Gran Turismo 7 is getting a free update to the PS5 version of GT7.
That's cool.
It's sort of a lot of things like that, though, right? Where it's like games are either getting updated for free or games that exist on other platforms and are getting ported to PSVR 2. No Man's Sky, Pavlov VR. But here, some of the games getting free updates in addition to Gran Turismo 7 include NFL Pro Era, Pistol Whip, that's a good one. That's a fun game. Puzzling Places, Resident Evil Village, that's a good one. Synth Riders, and I think one last, Zenith, The Last City. Unmentioned about free upgrades, though, Tetris Effect, Connected, Thumper, Res Infinite, Moss 1 and 2 remastered. I think we knew that was going to be like a remaster situation rather than you get those games and they just work on the PSVR 2. Kayak VR, Mirage. How do you feel about PSVR 2 and its launch lineup, Ben?
I don't feel great. I don't think there's anything here that's raising an eyebrow for me. It's kind of, here's a lot of games that have been in VR in the past and they haven't compelled a mass audience to go out and buy this stuff, but like, hey, now it's on PSVR 2. It's like, okay, like I'm curious about Horizon Call of the Mountain. That's maybe the most curious I am for any of these. And like, I love Before Your Eyes, and I think that's interesting to have that in VR. I'm curious what that's like. Stuff like The Last Clockwinder. I know Jacob Geller and Leo Vader on our team. They're huge fans of that game. So it was on our list of the top games of 2022. So it's nice to maybe get a bigger audience for that. But I'm kind of stunned by how uninterested I am in PSVR 2 at this point.
Yeah, are you stunned that they don't have Half-Life Alyx? Like, that's the thing. They should have figured that out.
Yep, and I'm really curious to see what Enhanced Games is doing. Hopefully their next game is going to make a big splash. The developers of Tetris Effect. That seems like that's going to pack a little bit of a punch for interest in PSVR 2. Even just like a port of Astrobot Rescue Mission. Like, it's surprising that's not here,
yes,
right?
I think I would have bet, Ben, I would have bet my house that Half-Life Alyx and or an Astrobot game would have been there at launch for the PSVR 2. It is wild. Put me out on the street, because that's wild that they don't have one or the other. I mean, Astro is so crucial, I think, to Sony at this point. And what are they working on if it wasn't this? I mean, hopefully it's like some awesome big Astro game that's just a console game. I would love that. Yeah. But I thought this was where they were going to show up again.
For sure. The other one that's kind of odd that it's not here, as far as I understand, is a Hitman VR.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand it's kind of a janky thing and people had problems with it, but it's weird that isn't here.
Right. It's not even mentioned for this launch window.
Yeah. Also, they don't have a port of Final Fantasy 15 Monsters of the Deep, the VR fishing game. That's a catastrophe.
Yes,
so
honestly, it's doomed to failure now, I think, yes. All right, keep it going. Rocket League Anti-Cheat will receive new functionality to stop bots. This is an update to a story where we talked about, hey, bots are showing up in Rocket League finally, and they're like AI trained, and they play in a weird way, but they're actually surprisingly good. This comes from Mirdad Kiyat at DualShockers. Rocket League developer Psyonix has revealed in a recent Reddit post that it has taken action against a number of accounts with a record of using bots in online matches until the end of 2022. The studio says it will continue to monitor online matches in order to take down more accounts should it deem it necessary to do so. The game's report system has now been updated with a cheater option, allowing players to report accounts that are suspected to be using bots. I want to say it was a miracle. If you wanted to go online and play a video game that didn't have a cheating problem, Rocket League was always there for you. So many games have so many like cheats that really ruin the experience, and Rocket League was mercifully mostly free of that for a very long time. And now that the bots have come, and now even Rocket League has to deal with that. I wonder if they have to just wait for a certain number of samples before they can begin eliminating those accounts, or if they can just instantly recognize here pretty soon, oh, this thing is playing like a box. They do play different than humans. This is weird though, right?
Yeah, what was their secret for avoiding bots for so long?
The AI models just weren't as common as they are today. It's really that simple. Like they're using like machine learning. The people that are using these things are these publicly available machine learning AIs that can learn how to play video games, and they've been trained on Rocket League now enough, and then you can implement them directly into the game, and it just sort of works. And so that's available now. So now it's showing up. Before this, it was like, an aimbot won't necessarily work. Sure, yeah, you can aim the car at the goal, but it's like that's not going to help you in such a dynamic game like Rocket League. It's not as simple as pointing on a head and clicking. Like that's why it works in a shooter. A computer, a simply trained, or not even trained, but like a simply programmed bot can aim at a head and click a button instantly. That's not how it would work in Rocket League.
Yeah, it's interesting that Rocket League is like the AI's challenge equivalent of like Go. Like chess was easy to conquer, but Go, that took a while for AI, but eventually they got there. So
and now like really this is a sign that everything is there. Any game is going to be playable by these generalized AIs. I mean, this is one of the big topics right now in wider tech with ChatGPT. But there's already tools to like detect if like a student is using ChatGPT to like write their essays and things like that. So it's going to be a battle back and forth going forward. Starfield release date to be revealed very soon, according to Bethesda. I feel like this was an obvious one, but I just wanted to put it on here. This is from Jonas Maki at Game Reactor. Bethesda and Microsoft have a mini event they call a Developer Direct, where that we will get to see plenty of new stuff for Forza Motorsport, Minecraft Legends, Redfall, and the Elder Scrolls Online. The upcoming space RPG Starfield, however, is missing. But it will get a separate event at a later point to really show it off in a proper way. And now the studio's saying that it's coming very soon. We will announce it very soon, and we are preparing a special event for the game. I believe this was in an Instagram post. Very soon is I think suggestive that like it's going to be within the next month or two, right? They can't say very soon, and then we're waiting till right before E3 to actually hear about Starfield again, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, do you believe the rumors that it's back half of the year at this point?
I think that it's if it's not June, it'll still be summer, but I think it might slip out of June into August. I think it could be August. Yeah, I don't think it's November. I don't think it's November, but I think August is totally possible.
Yeah. I'm curious to see. It's cool that they're that confident in it that they think it's worthy of a standalone presentation. Like, yeah, there's still a lot to dive into, a lot more gameplay to see. I'm curious to see, like, what that combat looks like. Hopefully, it's been, polished up a little bit since the last time we saw it. But I was struck listening to the Bombcast that you weren't all gung ho about the idea of Starfield being the best-selling game for 2023. I feel like that's a slam dunk, isn't it?
I think I think it very well could be. I think the thing with Skyrim was always that it continued to sell really well forever, and it had like the longest legs ever. I do wonder if like that means that the next game carries forward all that momentum into the first year of sales. It's possible. I don't know if it's a slam dunk though. But yeah, that same thing is true for Breath of the Wild or for Tears of the Kingdom. Like that was Breath of the Wild sold surprisingly well for a very long time, and that's why it's the best selling Zelda of all time. But I don't think either one is a slam dunk. I think they're kind of both like right up there, and then maybe something surprising could come along. I don't know. Armored Core 6 is actually going to release and just destroy everything. That's how it's going to go.
It's going to be something boring like Madden, I guess. But okay, if you had to predict it right now, Zelda or Starfield, what's total sales better for 2023?
I think I probably go, man, that's tough because I'll say Zelda because Starfield does have the aspect of, and it's on Game Pass.
Right.
And
right.
I think that doesn't necessarily immediately handicap it, right? Because Steam sales could be massive for a game like that.
I think they are
massive. And I think that's probably going to be the case. But I don't know if it'll be enough to carry it over a Zelda that people have been waiting years for, that comes at the end of the Switch when everyone has one. I suppose the piracy could hurt it a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Not really. I think Zelda probably does outsell Starfield. I think you're right. Madden probably will be number one because we don't have a Call of Duty this year, right? So
right. Yeah, it's boring. I'll go Starfield, and I'll bet my house on it.
All right, there we go. We're trading pink slips, everybody. All right. Finally, I just wanted to. This one was a fun one on the original Xbox subreddit. Someone mentioned that they were in their storage unit and they found the 50-cent Bulletproof original Xbox. And they were asking, hey, is this pretty rare? And the comments are like, oh my God, this is very rare and highly valuable. Only 4 of them were made. And this person has it in almost perfect condition. It's all wrapped up. The box is right there. The controller that goes with it. It looks incredible. Only 4 were made. There's a site that like tracks the rareness of consoles, and the site ranks it a 98 out of 100 in terms of availability, like how hard it is to find. So yeah, only 4 were made. Like this is like Channel 57 here in the comments. Holy shit, bro, you are right. Only 4 of this variation. So and it's actually really cool looking. I think it kind of looks like Mike Tyson's face tattoo, and then it says 50 cents Bulletproof with that Bulletproof script font, which is just, I don't know, I always like that. Bulletproof, not as good as Blood in the Sand, of course, but still, that's a cool looking Xbox.
I feel like first move would be to reach out to 50 Cent, right? Just to see if he has it, because he might not, but I bet he would want to buy it more than most people.
Absolutely. So you see what he's thinking. And then reach out to Drake. Drake just bought the gold PSP from Pharrell, so maybe he wants to get this next.
Yep.
There's still
perfect.
All right, I'm going to bring up the poll from yesterday, and then we'll get out of here. While I'm doing that, Ben, why don't you tell people where they can find you, what you have going over at MinnMax, things like that.
Yeah, the MinnMax Show podcast is our weekly podcast over there. We're an independent media outlet supported over there on Patreon.
Interesting.
Interesting. So, if you're curious about what we do, we have, a little primer on our YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/MinnMax. And we also just released, I guess not too long ago, like a best of 2022. So if you want a summary of some of the highlights and what we do over there, that's a good place for it. And, we added Kelsey Lewin, the co-director of the Video Game History Foundation, and Jacob Geller, and brought back Ana Diaz to the team in 2022. So it was a really, really good year for us. So we appreciate the support. And then this Monday, if you're listening to this in the near future, this Monday, the 23rd, we have a new episode of Trivia Tower, which is our monthly video game trivia competition, where everyone in the community can compete in game trivia to win game codes. They're giving away game codes for Mario & Rabbids Sparks of Hope, One Piece Odyssey, Little Gator game, a bunch of good stuff in there. And Maddie,
sorry, the music played over you for 1 second. Keep going. Sorry.
So we have a ton of game codes to give away, and Maddie Myers from Polygon and Triple Click is the co-host this time around. And Grubb, you got to be the co-host at some point. I know I reached out to you once, the very last second, but
yes, absolutely, I could do that. I also we do a monthly Jeopardy game, and my mods keep saying that, because we've very rarely been beaten. Imran beat us once, and they keep saying get Ben on, because we think he'll destroy you. So you're being tucked up. We might need to have you on there. So.
I'd love to do it.
Awesome.
I'd love to do it. But yeah, the MinnMax show is the primary podcast, so check that out. We'd appreciate it. And there's 2 ends in MinnMax, of course, in honor of Minnesota.
All right, the poll from yesterday. Is the Xbox division going in the right direction or on the wrong track? I tried to phrase it like that famous pollster question about, is America on the right path or going or on the wrong track? So 51.4% said right direction, 48.6% said wrong track. How do you feel? What do you think things are working out over at Microsoft, overall, big picture?
No. It's I don't know if we need to go back into this, but it is just that weird idea of for so many years now. I mean, since Don Matrick left, I felt like we feel pretty good about this leadership. Seems like they know what's wrong and they're trying to fix it. And it's just been year after year of not quite though. They're not there yet. They're not there yet. And you look at last year, it's hey, Obsidian, that was a great purchase. They really carried Microsoft through 2022, and everything else is still just bun in the oven,
Mm-hmm. Yes, and it's they have a lot to prove, and all the evidence before our eyes. It's at a certain point, you got to just trust what you're seeing, and it feels like they have a level of incompetence in terms of running the stuff that they've had for a long time. That's why wouldn't that rub off on the things that they're acquiring? I feel like they need to prove that isn't the case, and they haven't done that yet. All right, let's ask a similar question here for next week. Do you think Halo will be better off with 343 stepping away from direct development? Let's see here. And then we'll do Game Mess mornings, and we'll yes or no. But while I'm getting that all set up, Ben, thank you so much for taking time today to talk to me about video games. It really means a lot, man.
Yeah. I know it was a weird timing where I reached out in the morning to be hey, I'm up for being on Game Mess mornings. You're yep, you're locked in. And then it was a tumultuous second half of the day. So yeah, thanks for doing this. It's nice to hear, from somebody at Giant Bomb, and I'm sure Bombcast will dive into this stuff a little bit later, but just to give an update on how everybody's doing. And, obviously, if you can schedule a goodbye podcast with Jess and Jason, that would be awesome.
Yeah, we're trying to figure something out.
Things are complicated.
It is complicated. We're trying to figure stuff out. Best audience gaming. And thank you. I'm glad I could come and do this show today and speak to it somewhat. I'm a very open book. It's I always bring up the ADHD, but it makes me an overshare. I tend to just be it's easier for me to just say what's actually going on and give my real feelings, and that tends to work out better for me in the long run. That's not always great when you're speaking for a company. So when everything I said on the show mostly just comes from my own feelings.
Sure.
But I'll reiterate, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing the best that we can. Now, obviously, the best that we can is going to be a little bit diminished now because we lost 2 very important people. But we are going to do our best. For now, we'll figure that out. For now, let's keep focusing on Jess and Jason and give them the love and the support that they need, because they rule. And I think this community could step up and make sure that they know that they're loved. They already have, and let's keep it out. Let's keep at it, everybody. All right, let's get to our weekends. One more time, Ben, thank you one more time. You're the best audience in gaming. Until next time, have a good one. Take care of yourself, and goodbye.